Welcome to this episode. We're going to talk about financial data today and both introduce briefly financial markets, but also how to get data from the financial markets using public domain APIs and API keys. So what are financial markets? We'll have a quick look as an overview, but also in some of the products that they trade. So financial markets are places where people come and buy and sell things like any kind of a market. And in this case, what they're buying and selling are financial products. So financial products are things that represent money or value held in something or someone. So shares are value of companies, bonds are values of debt. We'll say a bit more about those in a minute. Financial markets have been traded on for hundreds of years, and they've gone out of a practical need to buy and sell things more efficiently. You don't necessarily want to have to go and visit every supplier to be able to buy and sell things. So that's one reason for having markets. And it helps companies who want to have public debt raise that money more quickly. Over the years, markets have grown and trade faster and faster, and with automation, can trade almost in real time. And more people than ever before are able to get access to these markets. So it's no longer just the case that big banks and finance houses access them, but as I'm sure you'll know, during the pandemic, many ordinary consumers access them and trade on them. That doesn't mean that trading is a good thing, and it doesn't mean that you're in any way guaranteed to make profits from trades. In fact, they can be a very risky thing in short-term product trading. So the different types of marketplace and different types of products that you can buy and sell, equities or shares or stocks, represent prices of the value of ownership of a company, a public company, and they're usually listed on the major stock markets. Examples like Apple or BP or Microsoft will have shares that you can buy and sell on the public markets. Many other companies are private. There are still shares in those companies, but they're owned by private investors, and they're not typically available for trading. Other things that you can buy and sell are funds related to the stock market indices. So these are made up of baskets of shares and can be traded in that sense like an individual share, but someone else owns the shares which you're buying and selling a portion of. So you can have someone owning all the shares representing value in the FTSE 100, the biggest 100 companies in the UK. We won't look very much at those, but unit trusts are one approach. ETFs, exchange traded funds, are another approach to trading at a market level. Very popular at the moment. Currency trading you can do with hoping to buy on foreign exchange market foreign currencies and hoping that their value will go up in UK terms. Almost always these things are considered in pairs, so pound to dollar exchange rate is what you're interested in if you're buying dollars, and vice versa, dollar to pound exchange ratio if you're interested in buying pounds from US dollars. Commodities are traded as well. Many commodities such as oil and wheat and metals like gold and silver and platinum and copper in particular, lithium for batteries, electric car batteries and other electric item batteries are commodities which you can invest in and trade and sell around the world. And finally, something slightly different is bonds. Bonds are debt instruments, so they're things that allow you to buy and sell debt. So government debt, if the government wants to borrow money, it will issue a series of bonds. Those bonds will be bought by people in the market with capital, and the government in return will say, okay, you give us the money for the bond, and in a set time, maybe 10 years, we'll give you a certain fixed interest rate. Bonds can be particularly popular as stable long-term investments, so you kind of know what you're going to get back. So how can we find data about shares and how can we view it? Well, there are many places to look at share data. London Stock Exchange has slightly offset in time data, usually by 15 minutes. Many newspapers have similar interfaces, so the FT has an interface, and historic data is going back many tens of years are available. Very often they'll go back to 1984. The example here is Unilever's share price going back to 1991, and you'll see, had you bought shares in Unilever in 1991, you'd be, well, certainly the capital value would have grown quite significantly by now. There might be two reasons for owning shares. One is that the capital value you hope will increase over time, so the value of the share will increase, but also each year based on their profitability, companies will pay dividends. So that's known as an income stream, and some people invest in shares not because they're going to grow in value, but because of the income stream that they'll get from owning a share of the company. So if we want to access the data, what do we need to do? Well, we need to be able to download it, to be able to manipulate it and visualize it and analyze it. And you can get back all the historic data from today or yesterday, going back in time to the starting point of the collection of the data for free from many sources. And one is Yfinance, which accesses market data that Yahoo publish. If you don't want to install it, you can just keep the data that comes with the course. We'll give you a set of data that's been recently downloaded. When you access the API, you need to send it a key to the company you want. So in the FTSE 100 is listed as an index as FTSE:FSI, Financial Services Index, whereas in Yahoo the code is little up arrow FTSE for FTSE. Unilever, the Unilever company, which is listed on the London Stock Exchange, usually abbreviated LSE, is ULVR, and in Yahoo they've made it even shorter, just Unilever.L. Large multinationals will usually have shares listed in multiple countries, so if you want to access Unilever's data in the London Stock Exchange, it's important to say .l to get that data. Okay, let's have a look at what it is that you can download. So here is the data downloaded from the Yfinance API. Yfinance, you just call and it will send back data. Other interfaces like AlphaVantage, you need to call with a registration key, but it will still send back free data for you. Again, delayed in real time, probably at least 15 minutes during the day. And also there's usually a rate limiter on the download. So the Yfinance API returns data for a range of things. This is data for the FTSE 100. That's the total basket of shares. It's a valuation of the total basket of shares in the FTSE 100. It has a date. The date shows here that this data is from 1984. And it will also bring with it a high, the day's highest price, the day's lowest price, the closing price and the opening price. So the opening price is the price first thing in the morning, closing price when the markets close in the afternoon. For indices, you don't get volume dividends and stock splits because they're not tradable, so there's no volume in the index itself because it's just a representation of the whole market. So now we'll just switch to showing you how to actually download some of this data and what it looks like when you're downloading it. So here's the setup for the code to download data. We're going to import some functions from the time module so that we can sleep, so we don't fire too many requests to the API and get shut down. We're going to import pandas as usual. We're also going to import OS, which is a standard library for dealing with locations. This just gives us a path called incoming path, which is where we're going to store the data that comes in. And then we import Yfinance here as the Yfinance library. And if I click run, that should all work fine. This next thing I'm going to set up is the symbol list, the request list for the ticker symbols that we want to grab from the interface. So I'm going to download data for 4 companies, ULE, SPT, ULVR and OGM. These are all different types of companies. We'll talk about them a little bit in a minute. This is the loop which will download all the data we're going to request. We start off by creating an empty data frame to put the data into and a count of 0 at the beginning. It runs through, increments the count, and it uses the count simply to decide if it should initialize the data frame or whether it should append to the data frame, depending whether it's the first symbol in the data frame or not. The loop just runs through each symbol in the symbol list we just created. It asks or sets up a ticker using the symbol to get the data. It then pulls down the historic data for that and uses as a time period max. So it's going to pull all the data from the interface for each of these 4 symbols we've got and append them to the data frame. And this last little bit in the loop here, apart from printing out something, sets up a sleep, and this waits 13 seconds. So for the Yahoo Yfinance interface, there's a limit of 5 calls per minute. So waiting 13 seconds, make sure we don't exceed that number of calls. And then finally, we just write that out. An incoming path which we set up above to this file alldatanewest.csv. So if I run this, we should see what happens. So the first symbol ULE.L pulls the data and starting for ULE in 1996. Then you'll see it's sleeping while it's waiting 13 seconds to get to the next data set. Then does the same call for SPT, which is a company called Spirant. Same call again, but to sleep, and send it to sleep for another 13 seconds, and so on. The next company is ULVR, which is Unilever. We successfully get the data for that. and we're sleeping again, and then finally we should get the data for Orgem. So Orgem is a company that invests venture capital into the FinData companies. So it's slightly different from Unilever, which makes things. It's a financial service in itself, and it borrows money on the market in order to invest in financial service companies. Okay, so now we've got all the data. We should be able to look at some of that. There we go. And we've got in there the open price, the high, low, the close, and the volume. And that's for ULE. Dividends are only usually paid every 6 months, and therefore it's not normally the case that there's been a dividend payment every day. And also stock splits don't have to very often happen, so you end up with not very many of those listed here, I think. Okay, so that's the data, and we will come back in the next episode with some information about how we visualize this basic data. Thanks for watching.